Hello everyone and welcome to another incredible game from round 7 of this year's Tata Still Masters section. It is Arjun Erigaisi versus the strongest 14-year-old on the planet. That is, of course, the Turkish Grandmaster Yağız Kaan Erdoğmuş. Both of them are doing well in the tournament. Not spectacular, but then again, not terrible. Both of them have 4 draws, a win and a loss. And they started off in a bit of a different order. Arjun started the tournament spectacularly. He defeated Pragnananda in round 1. And then 3 draws in a row, followed by a loss to Vladimir Fedosev, and then again a draw against Matthias Blubaum. Yağız Kaan, on the other hand, started off with 4 draws, and then he lost to Javokir Sindarov. We've covered the game. It was very close. It was either he's going to lose or he's going to draw, or lose or draw, or lose or draw. In the end, he lost, but then he sort of reinvented himself, just slept it through and then defeated Yoram Van Forest, and now he faces Arjun Erigaisi. So yeah, definitely the probably the best ever 14-year-old chess player. Hard to say. Okay, we're not comparing anyone to Magnus Carlsen, but even Magnus said that he's just incredibly talented, and he's just very, very mature for such a young player. But yeah, let's check it out, how he does against one of the best players in the world, not just a member of the top 10, a member of the top 5. Arjun Erigaisi with white opens with pawn to c4. We have pawn to e5, countering the English with the sort of the King's English line. We have pawn to g3 and knight to f6. We have bishop to g2 and pawn to c6, preparing pawn to d5, knight to f3, and pawn to e4. This is you don't have to play pawn to e4, but it is considered rude if you do not challenge this knight here, so everyone does it. Pawn to e4, knight d4, and pawn to d5. So this is the most played line. D3 is the move that was played here. Most played is c captures on d5, but okay, Arjun goes d3, and now queen to b6. This is incredibly rare, and Yağız Kaan did spend some 10 minutes deciding on this, even though as he claims, or rather as he claimed in an interview after the game, this was something that he had prepared. We have knight to b3, and now knight to g4, going for the immediate checkmate. Now bishop to b4 check here is the most played move. You could also play d captures on c4, as it was played in the game in Arkiev versus Nihal Sarin. But yeah, knight g4, just going for queen captures on f2. You have to guard against this. We have castles kingside. And I believe, not really sure, but I think knight to g4 was a new move. So, okay, as of move 7 already, we have a completely new game. So, castles kingside, defending the queen captures on f2 move, and now pawn to e3. We have pawn to f3 attacking the knight, and knight to f2. We have queen to c2 as the queen is hanging, and now knight to h3 check. And this is basically a draw offer from Yağız Kaan, because if you go king to h1, he will just repeat king to h1, and now he goes back. Otherwise, he's just worse. He has to go back, knight f2 check, and then king g1, h3 check, and so on. And Arjun would have to claim a draw here. But you do not claim a draw with white in 10 moves. So it's sort of your obligation to continue the game. He played bishop captures on h3. We have bishop captures on h3, and now rook to d1. Even here, Yağız Kaan mentioned that they had this in their preparation notes, that instead of rook to d1, that they were expecting c5 here, and c5 is the top move recommended by the engine. But on rook to d1, he had thing here. He said that he did not, couldn't remember, or maybe he never discussed it, or just doesn't remember it. But he played pawn to d4. And now we have pawn to c5. Okay, attacking the queen, queen back to d8, and now queen to c4 by Arjun, followed by knight to a6. Okay, the rook is coming into the game. The bishop will move. At some point, you will castle kingside, and this is still a pretty big problem for white, unless white is willing to trade here. And you could play knight captures on d4 and keep the queens on the board, but Arjun also, not sure about the extent of Yağız Kaan's knowledge about this position, decides to trade queens. He plays queen captures on d4. We have queen captures, knight captures. Now the idea is, of course, we're going to eliminate the e3 pawn, and the bishop captures on c5. We have bishop captures on e3 and castles queenside. So, okay, A very nice position for both of them. For the moment, the knight on d4 is hanging. We have knight back to c2 and rook h to e8. Challenging the bishop here, we have king f2 and knight to b4 now. Offering a trade of knights and the knight b to a3. Saying, okay, if you trade, my other knight is coming to c2. So here comes a very interesting move. You could play knight captures on c2. You could maybe even play bishop captures on e3, although it's not very good. The best possible move is rook captures on e3. And for the mere fact that the whatever comes to e3 to prevent the white king from being in check will never be able to move. And okay, knight captures on e3, and now bishop back to e6. What can white play here? There doesn't seem to be a great move here. Pawn to d4 definitely comes to mind, and this is the best. You could also maybe start by attacking the bishop with rook a to c1, but then bishop to d4 would prevent the move from being played, and you kind of want to give back at least a little bit of material to open up your pieces. So rook captures on d4, and now king to e1. Just getting that king out of the way. The thing is, if you capture on d4, it can be played, but after bishop captures and rook to d1, the bishop will just go back, and now you have to spend a lot of moves to get this, working. Pawn to f4, and the question is how to go about this. You can't really get the knight to c2 because that square is covered by the knight, so you will probably play bishop captures on a2, because if you challenge the knight, then just knight c2, so that's not going to work. Bishop captures on a2, then you're going to unpin with king f3, and then okay, the game continues, so nothing spectacular happening. But here king to e1 was played by Arjun, and now rook captures on d1, knight captures on d1, and knight captures on a2. And now if you look at it, what does Yağız Kaan have for the sacrificed exchange? Nothing, just that pawn. But the bishop pair and the position, it just works out for black. It's played on both sides of the board, so obviously the bishop pair is incredibly strong, and the knight on a2 for the moment, preventing the rook from coming to c1. It's an equal position. So okay, let's see what they do. We have king to d2, pawn to b5, and on the other hand, you also have 3 versus 1 on the queen side. If those pawns start marching down the board, it's not going to be easy stopping them. We have knight to c2 and pawn to a5. We have knight to c3 offering a trade, and Yağız Kaan does so. Knight captures on c3, b captures, and now a4, as this is now a passed pawn. We have pawn to e4 by Arjun, and king to c7. We have pawn to f4, pawn to g6, and knight to d4, putting pressure on the bishop on e6, and just bishop to c4. Now, later in an interview, Yağız Kaan was discussing bishop captures on d4, as it is the top recommended by the engine. It does improve white's center, but it also makes the b pawn a pass pawn, and then you just march the king down the board and advance your pawns to victory. So that's one way to do it. Bishop to c4 is still a draw, but with little time on the clock, and they still have to make 9 more moves to reach time control, or with this move 10 more moves. Keeping the bishop pair definitely does seem like a more human option. But okay, pawn to e5 and bishop back to e7. We have pawn to g4, now preparing f5, and at some point a breakthrough with pawn to e6. You will have to move the rook in order to achieve that. Pawn to c5, we have knight back to c2, guarding the b4 square, and king to c6. We have knight to e3 now, challenging the bishop, and bishop to b3. We have pawn to f5 and bishop to g5. He said that he was waiting for this move because it had to be played at some point, and then bishop to g5 was his main idea. King d3, and now bishop to f4, challenging on e5 and h2. King to e4, and now, believe it or not, pawn to g5, just defending that bishop. We have pawn to h4. Now, you cannot capture, otherwise the bishop would hang. Bishop captures on e3, king captures, and g captures on h4. Okay, so the two pawns on the h file can be easily picked up by the rook later. You're not worried about that. You want to play e6 and create a pass pawn as soon as possible. We have king to d2. You also need to free up the e file for the rook. And now bishop to d5. And this is one of the positions that we're going to mention briefly. Here, rook to e1 was played, which is not the most precise way to play. What you have to do is actually play pawn to g5. You have to wait for it. And now after, let's say, king to d7, you will play e6 check. And now if f captures, you can play g6. That's the point. And now if captures, you will play captures. Black king has to go after the pawn. And now you will play rook to f1, cut the king off. And this is now an equal position. For example, pawn to a3, you will play rook to f7 with check. You cannot really push the pawn as it doesn't really do anything. Pawn to e5 and the bishop covers that square. So you can go rook f7 check, king to e8, let's say king to c1. You will see pawn to h3, but now rook to h7 and everything is covered. This rook cannot touch the dark square, and also it's just going to be one here if you don't move the bishop. And this pawn also can never cross. Once it touches the a2 square, king b2 is coming, and you can never promote this pawn. So that is the way to do it, and not just the way to do it, that is the only way to do it. In the game, rook to e1 was played, and here is the first pause the video moment. This one's an easier one, the latter one will be the more difficult one. How do you win this? What's the problem with rook to e1? What would you play here? Probably what we've already discussed in the previous line, and that is king to d7. That is a move you have to play here. If you just start with pawn to a3, which also seems very nice, then e6 is a problem, because after captures and captures, pawn to a2, pawn to e7, yes, you can block, and you would gladly give up that bishop to promote your pawn, but there's no rush for white. Just king to c2, and after king d7, you will play king to b2. Now you have to block with the king, and now just rook e2, and there's really nothing for black to do here. Pawn to b4, you can trade, pawn to g5, pawn to b3. You don't care. Rook h2, you're going to start collecting pawns here, and, you know, there's no way for you to ever advance any of these pawns forward. The king is on a dark square. You have a light square bishop. You're never moving this king anywhere from b2. So it would be a draw. But king to d7, the move Kaan played, that move is now completely winning, because e6 doesn't really do anything. The king will just capture. The pawn and bishop will just capture, and the king is helping them do that. So rook to e3, and now comes pawn to a3, followed by king to c1. Now, the position is lost regardless of what Arjun plays, but here it's lost in a very special way. There's only one way to win this position, and this one, I would say, is a lot more difficult than the previous one. So what do you play here? While I give you a couple of seconds. And while I'm giving you a couple of seconds, it seems that I forgot to update the quote above the board, because yeah, at this point, maybe even good that I didn't update it right away, but it's also, you know, but okay, yeah. So you know who said it, because it's the title of the video. But yeah, after king to c1, bishop to g2, only move that wins the game. And once again, we can show why. For example, pawn to a2 looks winning, but you're going to play king b2, and now after bishop to g2, seems like it's the exact same thing. No, it's not. Rook d3 check. King e7, you're going to play rook to d6. And now after pawn to h3, rook to h6, and you're never touching h2, and you're never getting that pawn to a dark square. So this would be a draw. On the other hand, bishop to g2, now h3 is coming. The rook has nothing to say about that, and then h2, h1, and that's it. So the only way to stop it is e6 check. This is what Arjun plays. We have king to e8. E captures on f7 check, king captures, and rook to e6. Seems like it's the exact same thing, but now pawn to b4. We have pawn to g5 and pawn to b3. We have rook to f6 with check, king to g8, and now rook to e6. There's no point in going rook to h6. If you go rook to h6, just b2 check, and that's all there is to it. You like king b1, and then the bishop on e4 check gets the job done. So rook to e6 was played, but it doesn't really, you know, make a difference. b2 check right away. We have king to c2, pawn to h3, and now the rook, if the rook goes here, then it's again bishop to e4 check, followed by the promotion of the b pawn. So in the game, king to d3 was played, but he was also in this position upon playing king to d3 that Arjun Erigaisi resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So incredible victory for Yağız Erdoğmuş, like I said, the strongest 14-year-old on the planet. Incredible start, 4 draws against 4 incredible players. Then that lost to Javokir Sindarov, but then 2 victories against Jordan Pamforest and Arjun Erigaisi. He's now right back, in the race. It's going to be hard to catch up to Nodrbek because he's so far ahead of everyone by a full point and also in playing incredible, but that is definitely the way to do it. And there's just nothing. I mean, you're just B1 queen and that's it. I think he just, grabbed the king and then he just dropped it on D3 for no reason. And the board picked it up and saved it as a move. I have no idea, but yeah. You have no business continuing this game. And before I forget, here are the standings after this round has been played. So we are now going into the second half of Tata Steel. I will cover at least one more game from this round. So if you do not want to know the standings, this is the time where you should end the video. If you're interested in the standings, here they are. So Nodrbek in sole lead with 5.5 points. Followed by Javokir Sindarov with 4.5. Then we have 4 people with 4 points. Hans Niemann, as he drew his today's game against Javokir. We have Yağız Erdoğmuş now also on 4 points. Incredible stuff. Vladimir Fedosev and Jordan Pamforest with 3.5 points. We have Matthias Blöbaum and Vincent Keimer with 3 points. Anish Giri, who won a very, very nice victory today. Arjun Erigaisi and Gukesh Domaraju. 1 win, 2.5, Pragnananda 2.5, and Aravind Chittambaram on 2 points. So really weird tournament. I don't think, it's not that, it's hard. Okay, maybe this is a super tournament in terms of who's playing, but you also have some players who can't really be considered super grandmasters due to their rating, even though, regardless of how strong Yağız Kaan is playing, he's not considered a super grandmaster. So, yeah, in a tournament where you have non-super grandmasters playing, Prague Prague being second to last, something is amiss, as they would say, or something like that. But yeah, incredible stuff. We'll cover at least one more game. So if you have any favorites, do use hashtag suggestion. But I have a pretty strong idea of which game it's going to be. I would like to thank Simon Hugo Remjin, William Gould, Bram van Ginneken, Gary Jackoway, and Eric Stur for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, but mostly covering the events that unfold at Tata Steel 2026. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.